let's turn our attention to Ukraine because they are out of young men. Where'd they all go?
Dead.
They sent them all off to war to die needlessly when they could have lived and we could have had a peace agreement over a year and a half ago. Ukraine has sacrificed an entire generation of young men so that President Zelensky could sell a war to the world. And now Time magazine is reporting that the average age of a soldier in Ukraine is 43. That's outrageous to think about how they're gone. This is the Time magazine article we talked about a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. But think about that. They've used up all of their young men. Now, we've been saying this for months, and we've been called Russian apologists. Now, Time magazine is saying this. Are they Russian apologists for looking at the fact that these men are needlessly dying for a war? Now, having sacrificed a whole generation, it seems like Ukraine is being thrown under the bus of the Western media, or rather dragged under the bus that is the U.S. war machine, and just doesn't seem to have a use for this war any longer. How do we know this? Well, here's one clue. The Time magazine cover that came out just about 2 weeks ago says, "Nobody believes in our victory like I do." Nobody. I think he meant that as like an inspiring quote, but instead it made him look like a delusional idiot. Now the Washington Post this weekend shows just how far they're willing to go to throw Ukraine under the bus with this hit piece where they published a claim saying they had studied and found that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline sabotage that happened last September was done by Ukraine. Interesting. Here's the headline. Now, they even name names. They say that it was a man named Roman Chervinsky. I'm not going to show you his picture for a second because you got to wait for it. This is good. They say this guy was the lead on the Nord Stream pipeline destruction and that he had deep ties to the Ukrainian military and worked as a special ops forces to lead a team of 6 special ops men. Okay, so picture this in your mind because this is literally how Jason Bourne movies begin, right? Opening scene is that he has gone on this deep sea diving operation to kill off this head of state, right? Do you remember this movie?
Yeah, he's in a boat going off to kill off.
Right. So if you know what it takes to this is the archetype of someone who can pull off special ops deep sea diving. This is who the Washington Post wants us to think pulled this off. This guy is the Jason Bourne of Ukraine. So this, forgive me.
Looks like he wants to sell me a watch. He wants to sell me a knockoff watch in a pawn shop. That's
like in a bodega or something.
No, Philip. Yeah, he is Jason Bourne, Ukrainian style.
He looks like Boris Karloff, doesn't he? Like
who?
Boris Karloff, the famous,
Yeah, the old actor.
Dracula, or what's his name, who played Boris Karloff in the Ed Wood movie. Like he looks like
a bit. Yeah. Now, I don't like to judge a book by its cover, but this guy is, forgive me, a bit gaunt and skinny. He led a 6-person special ops team to sabotage a major Russian gas pipe for Ukraine, which has no navy. Now, he's a convenient scapegoat because he is currently in prison, according to the Post. He has been in prison for this scheme that happened in June of 2022. So just 2 months before the Nord Stream pipeline, he was up to this, according to Ukraine. He's being held on charges that he abused his power stemming from a plot to lure Russian pilots to defect to Ukraine in July of 2022. And they arrested him just this April. Now, okay, if you're pulling off this Jason Bourne Nord Stream pipeline...
Bela Lugosi look. Sorry, it's Bela Lugosi. Thanks, Grim.
Okay. If you're pulling off, if you're planning to pull off the Nord Stream pipeline, do you think you're maybe a little busy in the running up months to that? Or can you also be doing this plot that he was up to in July? Is that a fly by the seat of your pants kind of project? You would think you would.
When you're that close to Jason Bourne, I mean, that guy is basically Jason Bourne. I mean, look at him. When you're that close, you don't need planning to pull off something like that. You don't
think that guy needed training? Okay,
it's go time.
No,
yeah.
look at the guy. Look at the guy. I mean,
you don't need.
Let's leave him off the screen for a little longer.
Like Russians.
Why do they pick these patsies to be these Oswald? Like they're just little skinny guys.
Yeah.
Like they just make good patsies.
I mean,
I love that.
That's like Jason Statham is playing Jason Bourne. That's what I see there when I look at that.
Diego in our chat says, LOL, that dude is like 102 years old.
Wet.
Yeah, wet. Hey, but I will say this. Jacques Cousteau, was like, what, didn't he like die when he was like 100 years old? He did a hell of a lot of deep sea diving with his little blue hat, and he was gaunt and thin. So maybe he is leading some special ops team with no Navy to go down and blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Totally gets off the United States off of the list.
Right, with no practice, right? Because he's busy doing this other scheme in July of 2022. We know the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage was September of 2002. So he didn't need practice. He was busy running other schemes. And then like, okay, I'm ready. Now I'm going to go, blow up some major gas pipeline transatlantic. Okay. It's not transatlantic,
But I love that this Washington Post piece is like, the United States caught wind of it, but they thought then the plan had fallen apart. Like the U.S., which actively talked about blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. President Biden at the podium talked about getting rid of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
So too did Victoria Nuland. Like, we know this was their plan. And so the Washington Post says, the U.S. heard about this plan, but they didn't kind of believe it, and they thought it fell by the wayside.
They thought it had fallen through, so they didn't worry about it. Just like the October 7th attacks on Israel. Like, they maybe thought that it maybe could happen, but we just let that one slide and fell off the radar, I guess.
Yeah,
now, earlier this year, Zelensky had said that Ukraine did not blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, and he said that nothing like this would ever happen without him knowing. This was from a report earlier in this summer. But the Post report says that this so-called sabotage was approved by senior Ukrainian officials who reported to General Zaluzny, Ukrainian's highest-ranking military officer. So either they're calling Zelensky a liar or saying he's incompetent and doesn't know what his Army and Navy and Special Ops is up to. And again, Clayton's right. The Post doesn't mention any U.S. involvement, even though we have credible reporting from Seymour Hersh that the United States Navy was involved with Norway. And actually, even though our Navy, has some pretty tough dudes, they had to practice. And they were practicing, according to Seymour Hersh, all summer. But they obviously didn't have this Ukrainian Jason Bourne.
They don't need to practice, right?
No, our Navy, according to Seymour Hersh, did need to practice.
Yeah. The U.S. Navy, who actually pulled this off, the United States and Norway, who actually blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, had to practice this, and they practiced it for a long time.
He had the
But this guy, Jacques
Cousteau,
doesn't need to practice at all. Like, he's just so good at what he does.
Yeah.
That, he's like,
do you sometimes wake up and you're like, I think I'm going to go do this?
I've got a special set of skills. And I'm going to come for you, and I will find you.
Right.
Like, he's that good.
Even the plot of Jason Bourne, I'm sorry to keep going back to Jason Bourne, is just too good, is like he unfolds, like, how did I rent this boat? How did I get this scuba gear? How did I, he finds all the stuff. Even Jason Bourne had to prep for something like this. He couldn't be up to some kind of shenanigans in Ukraine in July of 2022 and then major sabotage. I know that's not a point that Jason Bourne couldn't do it, but it feels like one to me, so thank you for allowing me to make it. Now, again, this report is hard to believe, and it's bad for the media darling that is Zelensky. Now there are reports that he may be ousted for his refusal to negotiate a peace deal with Russia, a peace deal that the U.S. and the U.K. and NATO countries actively sabotaged in March and April of 2022, meaning the war could have been a matter of weeks, but now we have it for over a year, about a year and a half. And here is a former Ukrainian presidential advisor saying she thinks that this hard line by Zelensky not to negotiate peace will cost him the job, and that he'll be ousted by his own government that may start thinking that peace is a good idea. Ukrainian officials might start thinking, maybe there was something to this peace idea. Why? Because look at this. This is from footage from a cemetery in Kharkov.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
This is a new cemetery, by the way. So, there's a lot of people in the West that are like, hey, if Ukraine is really losing this war, then show us the graves. We don't believe that it's happening. Oh, it's not enough when Antony Blinken went and walked through graveyards. Here's brand new graveyards for you. So an entire generation destroyed by NATO. Young men gone. And the average age of the military now in Ukraine is 43 years old. 43. The United States, you can't even join the United States military if you're over 41 years old. And the average age now in Ukraine is 43. An entire generation just wiped away.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Over the weekend, there was a viral video that I wasn't able to verify, but there was a woman who was surrendering to the Russian army in Ukrainian military gear. And she says, don't shoot me, I'm pregnant. And the Russian soldiers are like, what the F are you doing out here? You know, get the heck over here. And they rescue her. So we don't know that that's true. These are viral videos at this point. But if it's got to this point where they're now using pregnant women and elderly men, I mean, 43 is not elderly. I'm 45. But older men past a military age, you know, obviously what we've been saying all along is that the West wants to drag this war out to the last Ukrainian is true. And it needs to have stopped over a year and a half ago. Now, the truth about this war, that the people in the Donbass have been being terrorized by Ukraine for over 10 years, and that those people asked Russia to protect them and then voted to join Russia, that is something that is now being said in public. So we have been called Russian stooges for it. Having never been to Russia, we read no Russian, but that's what we're called because we're saying something that's inconvenient. Well, now
my favorite is Putin puppets.
Putin puppets, yeah. Someone once said Clayton was married to, who was it? The Dmitry Peskov,
yeah. They said it was, yeah.
That was Clayton's husband. That's weird.
Yeah.
Clayton is married to me.
Yeah.
Not that guy. So yeah, we've taken all kinds of crap for saying this for a long time because we're reading. That's it. And we don't like war narratives. But at least now that's being said in public by very few people, but on a mainstream stage. I don't know if you caught this, but last week, presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy said this truth about this war at the Republican debates, mostly to war lover Nikki Haley.
She loves war.
She loves it. She loves war like Chanel suits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who is falling for that war rhetoric, but I saw a tweet this weekend. It was like, someone needs to take her phone because all she wants to do is get on Twitter and go after a new war every single day. If you support her, please tell me why. Do you love war too? I would like to know. Anyway, this is what he said to her and in response to the war in Ukraine. And he also said it to the press, which has been absolutely complicit in these war lies. I was thoroughly impressed with that, actually, because those are the things we've been saying for a really long time, not because we want them to be true, but because they are true.
That's why Tucker, it was one of the reasons Tucker was fired. You know, like, you can't say that stuff on mainstream television.
Yeah.
You can say it here on Redacted. We've been saying it since the beginning of the war. But you can't say, and we, by the way, we've been banned multiple times and blocked multiple times here on the show. So, you know, and YouTube has taken us off and so forth. So you can't say this on mainstream media. Like NBC was like, oh my God, hit the panic button.
Her face when he's like, this, you want to support a country that's banning Christians? And she's like, yes, I do.
Yes,
I want that.
She's like, I know it's inconvenient. She's like, it's fine that, you know, that's fine that there's thousands of Christians in Gaza that are being killed as well. Like, shh, don't talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about it. We have to just pretend that that doesn't happen, that Christians are fine. No, they're being killed. They're being killed and they're being marginalized and they're being banned all over the place. And we can't talk about it. It's inconvenient for the mainstream media to talk about it. Go ahead, David.
I just wanted to say I love when he called her Cheney in heels.
Yeah. Or who is it? Paul Joseph Watson called her Republican Hillary Clinton. I liked that too.
Well, I mean, or it was either him or her or DeSantis in heels, like, you know, because DeSantis wears heels. So I think it was part of that. I don't know exactly, but yeah. So it was a great moment. Yeah, it was a great moment calling this out. I think you're seeing some awareness now in the West. You're seeing some major publications. You're seeing Time Magazine. You're seeing some other their publications
Well,
putting
at
this
least
out.
Vivek Ramaswamy said something that was honest when he was asked. It's dishonest for the mainstream media to have championed this war for so long, making Zelensky this poster boy, this media darling, and then all of a sudden it's not the sexy war anymore. Seems like the deep state doesn't want it, so they just comply. They have owed us a truth since March of 2024 and beyond, and before that, for as long as those people in the Donbass have been being bombed, and they've refused. So this is very convenient and journalism, and I will not applaud it all of a sudden that they're like, oh, well, we don't want this war anymore.
Let me just say something about the Vivek comments here, if I can, David, because like Shadow Files in the chat says, who cares? Vivek will say anything to be accepted. F him. And then Ottawa says, is Vivek controlled opposition? So is someone like behind Vivek putting him out there as controlled opposition? Great question. Who knows, right? Who knows, right? But will he say anything to be accepted? Perhaps, but let's just take him at how he answered that specific question and answered it honestly. And it's like, we can throw people out. You can throw babies out with the bathwater.
Sure.
Right? And I think just on that point, that's the point we're talking about here is Ukraine tonight.